Thank you all for tuning in to this special episode of the Dream Shakers podcast. Uh, this is a episode where we bring people to interview and hear their perspective on what it is to break into the tech space and where they are now. We have a special guest today, someone who has made moves, someone who has persevered, someone who has overcome obstacles as a Black slash Latino founder and still found ways to pave the way for people like myself, like Steph, and many of you trying to break in. Please, without further ado, we would love to introduce Ruben Harris from Career Karma. Welcome to the show, brother. Such a pleasure to have you on here.
Thank you guys, man, and I love the way we connected. We connected through audio on the Clubhouse, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Interesting,
Good memory.
interesting how it all works together,
Absolutely. And with that, we would love to kick off the interview. We did some research. We did some due diligence. We realized that you were born in Cali, but you were raised in ATL. Talk about that experience. How was that upbringing for you? And we noticed that you had a tight knit family, and you also was exposed to playing the cello and SEO and MLT. Let's get into that. What was that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I brought up the way you and I connected and the piece of audio because um, we both have roots in podcasting, right? You're running a podcast. I have a podcast that I started. And growing up in Atlanta, radio is a very big thing. The DJs run the city. Like Atlanta's the heart of the music capital. Now most Black and brown people, most poor people listen to radio, television, right? So I grew up inspired by the DJs, inspired by the promoters in the clubs, like the Kenny Burns, like the whole like paid in full energy that you watch, like in that movie, like that's the
Right.
type of energy you walking in. That's the stage, right? Um, and what's interesting about radio is that um, they've they've got distribution on lock, and so I understood that part of the reason why you mentioned the cello, part of the reason why an artist or any like not just a classical musician, but any type of artist needs to work with a DJ and radio so that they can reach the ears of the people, right? And so one of the first things that my parents taught me growing up was the importance of having a voice, right? And the power of being able to create, and which I think is the purpose of technology is having a voice, the power to create, the power to organize. And so, two of the things that my parents wanted to do was give me things that nobody could take away from me but myself, which was language and music, right? So my first language, as you mentioned, is Spanish. My mother's Cuban. My father's Black, but he also speaks Spanish. He speaks many languages. He speaks Spanish, French, Portuguese, Chinese, and English. And his whole thing was, they live in America. They're gonna learn how to speak English. Let's like get only talk to them in Spanish, just like how I'm doing with my nephew here with my sister. Um, Only give them Spanish church, Spanish music, Spanish babysitter. So when I went to school and I was 5 years old, I couldn't speak English, and I learned it over time, right? And same thing with music. Music is the universal language, right? So it can communicate with anything. And so, I started playing cello when I was 4 years old as well. And I was also in Montessori school. And the reason why I bring that up is because taking all of those concepts about having a voice, being able to speak a language, the importance of creating is that Montessori teaches a lot about um, being an individual, but having a deep sense of community and responsibility for your community
Mhm.
and how to make whatever you're at better. And so, you know, growing up in Atlanta, and having this like learning through play and things like that, and seeing other Black people that were successful, and growing up around other people that speak Spanish that were successful, did a lot for me. And we can talk about MLT and SEO in a second, when we start getting deeper into the breaking story. But that I would say radio, television, music, distribution, voice, language were all a very big key to me, especially now that we're talking about a tech-driven world where the universal language through tech is code.
Mm.
Definitely a lot to pick apart there, especially when you came to that latter piece, which will bring us into this next question about, a tech-driven world. So we saw that, through your background, through services like LinkedIn, that you initially had some experiences in banking, right? And then you made that transition from finance into tech. So, what was that process like? How did you come to that decision? And then was the end goal always to eventually start your own company?
Yeah, I always want to start my own company, but I knew that there were steps to get there. Um, Got to know how the game works, and I love using the word game because um, we're living in a very special moment right now in 2021. It literally feels the same as when I graduated 2010. You know, um, I don't know if you guys saw that meme that's going around that says it has a picture of GameStop and AMC, and it
Oh,
says, "I'm gonna tell my kids they're Silicon Valley." Right? This is like the new Occupy Wall Street movement, and I love that GameStop slogan is "Power to the players." Because when I was in college, when I graduated from school, the people that had the power were finance, right? It's they call them the masters of the universes, the masters of the universe, the big swinging D words of America, right? The and I just not that's what they say, right? Everybody watches Wall Street, they watch Boiler Room. Like growing up, it was either you be a banker consultant, you do that for a few years, do private equity, boom, like that was the way. Every school, that's what you want to do. And my reasons to go into banking weren't because of that. It was because as an artist, I met a classical musician. I met a banker that told me if I wanted to be a successful musician, I had to learn business in a short amount of time. And so the fastest way to do it is to do investment banking because you're working 80, $100 a week and you learn a lot about business. The problem with that is when I graduated, um, um, tech, this was still around like the Occupy Wall Street time when people were fighting against what was going on. There was the Lehman Brothers, the Bear Stearns type of thing. It was hard to get a job. People were getting laid off, so it had kind of like pandemic issues that you're dealing with. And what was interesting is that I had to figure out how to break into finance. And the problem is to get into investment banking. You guys know this because you guys are consultants and bankers. Um, you have to have your internship in college, and then you have to break into like their recruiting cycle. Like, so you get your internship junior year, you got to break in senior year.
Right.
But the problem is I graduated, I had none of that.
Wow.
And so during my search, when I decided to do banking after I graduated college, which was off cycle. I had a terrible GPA, which you have to have a high GPA. Everybody was telling me it was impossible. I discovered a website called Mergers and Inquisitions, and they had a course that they launched called Breaking into Wall Street. So I was like one of the first beta users of Breaking into Wall Street, where they taught you financial modeling. And after teaching myself financial modeling, I discovered SEO and MOT. I discovered, for the people that don't know, it's not search engine optimization. It's sponsors for educational opportunity, which SEO is an important conversation, but SEO, we're talking about Black people right now. So we're talking about SEO. But the problem is SEO is the same process. You have to be in a junior, you have to be in school, and you have to get in. So how am I going to tap in? And so at the time, and I think maybe they may not say this, but it's probably me causing this. They used to publish all the names of the people that got into SEO publicly. And so
wow.
I actually cold emailed all 300 people for that cohort,
Wow.
for the 2011 class or the 2010 class or whatever. And all of them responded to me. Like, I would say all of them, but like maybe 70% of the people that I reached out to from SEO responded to me to help me get into banking. So I like huge shout out to people like Asan Salim, people like Raphael Telehan, James Moss, all these people that did SEO that really taught me the game and taught me how to interview properly. And the key at the end was not just them teaching me the game, but them allowing me to set up a booth at Morehouse. So I set up a booth at Morehouse for SEO without being actually SEO, which gave me access to a career fair.
That's
And then I
crazy.
met the banker people.
Wow.
And then when I met the people at BMO, I told them my story, and they were like, walk me through a DCF model right now. I was like, all right, cool, easy. Walk me through this, boom. Walk me through the three. Like, tell me how this much money flows through the 3 income statements. So I was like, boom, and I was ready for all the Baker questions because I had read the blog and I did the courses, and they invited me to a Money Never Sleeps event, which was at Atlantic Station at the time. So they bought out the movie theater. So this was like when Wall Street 2 had come out, and then I passed that interview because I met the head of M&A or whatever, and then they flew me out to Chicago to do the Super Day.
Yep.
Wow.
Wow.
I got into investment banking, and
Crazy.
when I got into the bank, they treated me like an SEO guy, even though I wasn't SEO, and they put me into a group of other Black men and women that were in banking that like really changed my life. So it was dope.
Wow, it's so crazy to hear your story thus far, Ruben. And again, congrats on that banking transition, because I completely get it, right? Like, I was in the trenches, in the mud, trying to break in, and it took those crossing those hula hoops or those barriers where you were saying, like, getting into SEO, getting into MLT, just to gain some traction. And I was able to do that banking component through a summer internship at Nomura, and then doing public investment banking at Wells. So I could definitely relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then while I was in there, you know, it was still hot to be in banking. And then I ended up being at a bank in Atlanta. And what's crazy about that is I had wanted to stay in Atlanta. I had interviewed for this bank in Atlanta. I got rejected. Ended up at the bank in Chicago. Ended up getting recruited by the bank in Atlanta. But then when I came in as a second year investment banker, I came in with rank and with respect. That also ended up being the situation that led me to my co-founder, Archer Meister.
Wow.
And we hit it off because we were both into art and business, because I'm a cellist. He was running a website buying and selling contemporary art. He had a twin brother working an auto trader. And that's when we started noticing the tech wave taking over everything. And that, like, the people that got power aren't the finance people no more, right? You got, like, that was when Bitcoin was coming up. So BitPay was hot. This was when Coinbase was still like in the baby stages. This is when nobody knew who Balaji Srinivasan was. I was peeping Balaji Srinivasan while I was in Atlanta. And so as soon as Balaji got named the general partner at Andreessen, he had like 900 followers. I was just like, oh man, this dude's into education. He's into Bitcoin, he's into healthcare. Like, I got to get on this dude's radar. So I would just, every time he said something, I would tweet. And I could see Bitcoin was going to be this big thing. I was telling the church to get into Bitcoin. I was telling everybody, like, we got to hold, like, we got to have, it was the diamond hands moment of that time period.
Right.
And it's still something that's going on now. And long story short, when I said I want to organize a Bitcoin hackathon, Balaji reached out through DM and was like, yo, like, we need to get you into tech. And like, I was like, man, this dude's telling me to break into tech. This is a big deal. Like, something's in my gut telling me I need to buy this one-way ticket out there and meet this dude. Even though it was brief and it wasn't very long, like, that moment of just like someone believing in me was a big deal. And so anyway, after that moment, somebody from the bank quit their job. This buddy named Adam Waxman. And then he popped up as an engineer 3 months later, and he was in a boot camp in New York called Flatiron School. And the boot camp that he was in was in the same cohort as a guy named Jack Altman, who's Sam Altman's brother from Y Combinator. And he was also a former investment banker. Crazy. He's now the CEO of Lattice. And I didn't know what Y Combinator was. Most of our people don't know what Y Combinator is. And so then once we started understanding, I was like, okay, Y Combinator is this world largest tech accelerator. They've created hundreds of billions of value. And it seems like if you get into YC, like, that's gonna like really teach you the game. That's the type of education that I need, right? How do I get into that? Well, you know, you could start a company right away, but it might be a good idea to get some skills first and get a network first to know the game, right? Because you got to know the game if you want to play the game and win, right? And so, long story short, my co-founders, one of the things that YC says is you got to make something that people want. So you got to write code, talk to users, and do things that don't scale in the beginning. And so Archer and Timor decided they were going to be the investment bankers. I mean, the software engineers. And so they decided to do 2 different boot camps. I decided that I was going to be the sales CEO, like raise money guy. And so they started boot camps. I bought a one-way ticket to San Francisco. I got a place to live for a month. 3 weeks later, I found a job, wrote a story about it called Breaking Into Startups. And that story blew up and got millions of views. And I named it Breaking Into Startups off of the Breaking Into Wall Street story, which is like the nice full circle moment. So that's how we got to this. So yeah.
Wow. Wow. And that's definitely an amazing story on how you break into tech for sure. And that leads to that next question, right? So we understood the banking aspect of it. We understand the tech aspect of it. Now, what birthed Career Karma? We hear certain things about the boot camps. You knew co-people that did Flatiron and things of that nature. What created Career Karma? And could you share to the audience what Career Karma is? I mean, Steph and I know what it is. We did our research, but people may not know.
Yeah, so Career Karma is the easiest way to find a job training program online. So what we do is it's a marketplace. So we match workers to job training programs so they could get high paying jobs in 3 to 12 months. So there's 6 different career paths that we offer. You can be a coder. You don't have to be a coder. You can be a salesperson. You can be a designer. So anybody and their mama download the app, and we get them a job in a year, making about $70,000 to $100,000. What makes us unique is not only will we match you with a job training program, but we'll put you in a small group called a squad of peers that are like you, other people from New York, other people from your borough, other people from your neighborhood that are doing this journey at your level or one step above you to give you support during the program, during the job search. And then when you get to the job search, you can find other people like you that are employed that can refer you and help you get employed. So that's what we do. And we started off with boot camps. We have a directory of 450 boot camps. And for the people that don't know what a boot camp is a job training program that teaches you exactly what companies need. The main difference between a boot camp and a college is that a boot camp measures its success on you getting a job. Right? It's not about certificates and degrees, even though you'll get one of those. It's not about just learning how to code. It's get you a job. Did you not get a job? Okay, it wasn't successful. And now we're in this era where there's over 55 million Americans that have filed for unemployment in 2020. They're looking for jobs, right? They're not trying to pay no money for nothing that doesn't get them no job, right? Everybody's trying to secure the bag. And so the way that we position ourselves for this moment is it's the product that we wish that we had when we were breaking into tech, right? The advice that was given to me to get into tech was move to the West Coast. It's a magical place. You'll figure it out. Right? And that's terrible advice for most people, right? You know, and like if you buy one way ticket to San Francisco, like it can work if you're somebody that's like a hustler like you guys. I'm not saying that everybody's not hustlers, but just like it's kind of like raising a baby. It's like there's no manual, there's no guide, there's no steps, and getting a job is way less complicated than raising a baby, right? And a lot of the people that come to Career Karma are raising lots of babies. Like most of the people that come to us are parents, so you already got what it takes, right? You already and we're in a beautiful position where we're stuck at home in quarantine and we have time to study, right? Right? And we are in a beautiful position where we can like take time to level ourselves up where our kids are watching us make this transition to create legacy for people. And so going back to this genesis of things, when we moved to Silicon Valley, we realized that most of the media covered stories of CEOs and venture capitalists, but not the people that are actually building the companies. Because like if you hear a story about Elon Musk, I'm inspired by Elon Musk, but like how's most people going to get to Elon Musk? right? It's like it's not as attainable, right? I think yes, my story is more relatable. That's fine, but like because I've been through it, just like a lot of other people have been through it. But like, how do we just do mostly stories of everyday people like you and me that figured out how to break into tech and make sure that people can hear that every day, right? People from the South Bronx, people from Brooklyn, people from Chicago, people from DC, people from Atlanta, right? How do we share those stories, right? And don't sugarcoat it. It's not just a beautiful like Hollywood glossed over type of thing. Like tell them the real, right? Because that's what I needed. I needed the real that nobody was comfortable sharing. And so we started a podcast based off of the blog called Breaking Into Startups. And we shared stories of everyday people that broke into tech. And going back to my roots for radio and a voice, I went back to, I created a relationship with TechCrunch. And TechCrunch allowed me to drop episodes in TechCrunch, sharing these stories. And I'm talking about like high school dropouts from North Philly that grew up in gang violence. I'm talking about people that were making $250,000 a month from cocaine dealing at 19 years old, people that were locked up in San Quentin prison for life, like all of that, single moms, like veterans, everything. And also just the whitewash too, like or the silver spoon, like just the classic stuff too, just investment bankers, lawyers, the consultants. Like we had those stories too. So just a balanced approach. I think I try to stay away from the words like diversity or minority. I like balance. I like underestimated because it captures more than race. It captures more than sex. It captures socioeconomic issues. It captures religion. It captures disability, right? The world is beautiful. Like we just got to figure out how to like help each other out. And so, long story short, after sharing those stories, we had a lot of people reaching out asking how to break in. So we created a chatbot that will point people to the teaching programs for the jobs that they want. And then the teaching programs, the boot camps, started saying, hey, we'd be willing to pay you money to get access to these people that are trying to come to us. And like some of them were like, hey, we'll pay you like $5,000 a month. We're like, that was the first person. Like, well, that's like $60,000 a year. How many of these boot camps are there? It's interesting. Do colleges do this? Wow, colleges pay $10 billion a year for enrollment. Interesting. How much do trade schools pay for it? Billions too. Wow, very interesting. Maybe there's something that we could do around here, just focusing on boot camps, because if boot camps are leading the way for education that is shorter, cheaper, faster, and more effective at getting people jobs, the rest of the education system will eventually catch up because they have to, because rapid reskilling is one of the most critical issues of our time. Correct. And if people are going to go to 5 or more careers in their lifetime and go to multiple schools and multiple companies in their lifetime, then the value to the individual is not necessarily the school or the company that they go to. It's the network that they're the part of. And so we decided to create Career Karma as the network that becomes the SEO or MLT for anything. So we will be the best career navigation platform of all time for any individual. So no matter what career you want to get into, we'll match you with the right people, the right training programs for the skills, with the right companies at the right time.
Heavy. I think one piece that really stood out to me in regards to, some of the earlier information that you were sharing with us in regards to how, why Combinator played a crucial role in the development of this latest offering, Career Karma. I wanted to tap back into that and speak a little bit more about the personal impact the accelerator had on the ways that you framed Career Karma, the way that you believe that this company is going to continue to grow in the future, and also like what role did those initial learnings have on those very early stages of the company? Could you dive into that?
And also speak to elaborate on Steph's point, Ruben. Could you also speak more in depth about it as well, because there's also pitfalls within accelerator too that people aren't aware of, in the sense that they don't know what to do with certain capital, or they don't know how to truly manage people and truly effectively run a startup. So could you even speak to that as well?
Yeah. So I'll say number one, the CEO of Y Combinator is a black man. All right. So going back to the media piece, like seeing someone like Michael Seibel, who's a CEO, that has also started a company that sold for almost $1 billion as well, is very inspiring. That also is a father, right? That also like really cares about people and gives it to you straight. Like that's a lot. That's a lot. That also like believes in you and tells you that they believe in you. Like that's a lot before they do a lot of things. So I think that alone was a very big deal. I think people underestimate the importance of like having someone tell them that they believe in them. And what I like about Y Combinator is it gives founders that are unproven a chance. Right? They give them a stamp of approval. Um, I'll come back to Y Combinator in a second because it's going to touch on kind of like what George said. A lot of people don't know how to run startups because they never worked at a startup before. And the problem with a lot of the media focused on Black and brown people or underestimated people in general, it is always about access to capital. How do we raise money? Blah, 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 which is an important conversation. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
However, it can be very toxic because most companies fail. And also, a lot of the people that are wanting to raise capital, they haven't taken the time to find co-founders that are technical, that they know well, or they're not technical themselves, right? So a lot of times when you're thinking about starting a company, the basics are the founding team, right? And the founding team needs to have something that's tying them together that's deeper than money, right? Because a co-founder relationship is very similar to a marriage, right? You're gonna fight, and that's not a bad thing because you all are passionate. It could be a bad thing if you're not aligned, right? Because I think 60% of startups die because of co-founder blow up.
Wow.
Like some people, yes, and some people believe in co-founder dating. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but I would probably put it on the same chances as like finding the one on a blind date, right? It's possible, highly unlikely, right? And so when you think about how to increase your chances of finding co-founders, one of the best ways is to work with them in some kind of way. That's why a lot of people's co-founders come through college, right? If you look at Y Combinator in the early days, they would go to schools like Stanford to find potential future founders that know each other, that can build companies together. Peter Thiel, when he started the Thiel Fellowship, what did he do? Encourage people to drop out of school that had worked together and try to like start things, right? And just in general, like education is still at the core of a lot of this type of stuff. And so you're either going to find your best co-founders through work or through school, right? And so what I try to encourage people to do versus starting a company early is work at a tech company first so you can understand how it's built. Don't go to a big tech company like Google or Facebook. And I'm not saying that Google or Facebook is bad, but it's not going to teach you what you need to run a startup. Work at a startup that's like Series B and either below or above, right? Between Series B, Series C, or below. And that's going to really be a nice little sweet spot to really learn a lot about how to run a startup. And then if your future goal is to start a company, while you're working at that company, you're going to find someone that could be your potential co-founder and then you guys are going to kick it, maybe play some board games, maybe watch some movies, maybe play some video games, whatever. And then you're going to talk about life and problems that you see in the world and struggles that you've been through. And then once you hit it off on something that you're aligned with, you guys might build a side project that is the MVP or minimum viable product for your future company. And then make that side project make money. And then once that side project makes more money than your current job, quit and then apply to Y Combinator. So now you've already launched. You're not losing money. You're making money. You can sustain yourself. You were also making a salary through your current job, and you're able to leverage resources and other people that are around you. They might even encourage you, right? Some companies will even fund you on your next thing. A lot of times you don't even realize that a lot of the founders of startups are also angel investors. So they might even bless you with a check on your way out. You know, that's the smart way. And you need to have a technical co-founder. And I think that's probably the biggest issue that I see in our communities is like not having the people that they try to outsource code. Like you can't be outsourcing code. Like it's kind of like, you know, I think the best analogy that I think, and I'm trying to do this with certain of my celebrity friends, is like make the comparison between music, right? In order to be successful in music, which we've been able to do, you needed somebody that was the engineer or the producer, right? You need Dr. Dre, right? 50 Cent, Eminem are nothing with the game. They're nothing without Dr. Dre, right? So who's Dr. Dre of your team? That's the coder. That's the engineer. And we need more of those because you can't just have the artist by themselves. You got to have the sound.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was.
So anyway,
that was... Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah. So that was like not the full answer, but that's the main. And I could talk more about the Y Combinator actual experience, but I think that's how I think about it.
Absolutely, brother. Definitely. You mentioned something interesting about. Well, this is all great and free game for sure. We definitely appreciate it. You talked a bit about capital raising, right? And what that process was like. I like to call that like getting it out the mud, right? Because each step of the way, you're just hustling and grinding and reaching out to different VCs or angel investors or families and friends, right? And then you're trying to curtail that to who would invest in your industry, in your product or startup that you're looking for. So could you speak about what that milestone was like once you reached Series A, $10 million raise, and what does that truly mean for Career Karma?
Yeah. So when it comes to fundraising, a lot of people don't realize that the cost to launch a startup has gotten a lot cheaper. Like you can use no-code tools like Webflow or Bubble or anything like that to like have a proof of concept. And a lot of people don't launch anything and then try to raise money and just be like, hey, I got this idea. How do I raise money for it? But like, it's not about the idea, it's the execution. If you have an idea that you feel is going to make money, prove it. Even if you make $1, but prove it. You know, like in the beginning, a lot of people like to use a lot of vanity metrics and just be like, oh, like I got this, I got that, this many impressions, like that, this many views or whatever, this many likes. Your main KPI in the beginning is how much revenue are you making, period.
And how much you burning too, correct?
And how much you burning. How much you burning, for sure. You definitely want to be mindful of that. I'm just talking about in general. Yeah, for sure. You definitely want to be mindful of the burn rate, but just in general, like people confuse raising money with making money. Right? And raising money is definitely very important, but you'd be surprised that like the amount of money that you want to raise in the beginning is, if you need it, is just enough to live and pay your bills, right?
Right.
And so for us, like we quit our jobs and we applied to our Combinator and we actually got rejected, right? And that was a shock,
Mm-hmm.
but we did. And so we had to raise 100. We wanted to raise 150,000,
Mm-hmm.
and we did. We did. We raised, ended up raising 300,000 in about 2 weeks, and then we lived off of that. And then we applied again at the end of the year and got into our Combinator, then got another 150,000. But I say that because in the beginning, it's just, and always, it's always about traction, right?
Mm.
The way to get leverage is to have traction, right? The main difference between startups and everything else is growth, right? And you don't even, like, sometimes you don't, it doesn't always have to be revenue that's growing, but something needs to be growing very quickly, right? People get on Clubhouse for their valuation at $1 billion, but like, what? Like, how many startups have you seen that have that type of growth that are in like the 2 million users? And last year, they only had 5,000 users. They're in like the millions of users, and they're growing. They're onboarding like 5,000, 4,000, 5,000 people at a time, right?
With
Every day.
Still with an invite only system at that.
Still with the invite only system, still on iPhone. I don't care who it is, white, black, Chinese, Asian. Show me somebody that's growing that fast. I'll introduce you to somebody that will cut you a check that gives you $1 billion valuation. I promise. I'll prove it to you. You know, like, and so like traction trumps everything. Traction trumps everything. And so, and most people don't have a breakout success like that. And so what you got to do is like and focus on revenue. And so to your point, you want to also be mindful of burn, which for the people that don't know is like your expenses plus your revenue, right? So, and you want to be mindful of that so you don't run out of money. You don't want to die. But once you, I mean, at the end of the day, like the longer that you can stretch, there's a good Paul Graham essay that everybody should read. It's called Default Dead and Default Alive, right? And it talks about how to give monthly updates to your investors, which you should do, and always let them know if you're default dead or default alive, and like what point your runway is that you're going to run out of money, or that you won't, or like what you need in order to keep growing, and just kind of like it's a good way to stay on top of things. But long story short, fundraising is a combination of metrics and traction, but it's also a function of story and where you're going to go. At the seed stage, it's less rigorous. At the Series A stage, it's way more rigorous, and you do have to have models and things like that. But in the beginning, like you don't really need financial models and like anything crazy like that. You just have to have like you're proving that you're doing what you're doing, and you do want to have numbers to back up what you're doing. But yeah. You also asked what it means for career karma. I would say like the capital that we raised during the seed stage was to prove that we can make money and grow it fast, which we did, which is part of the reason why we've been profitable for the last 5 months. And then and before we raised, and then you also asked, and then for the Series A money, a lot of that capital is going towards hiring an executive team to really take this to the next level.
Definitely understand that.
By the way, I got 6 minutes left. Unfortunately, I got another interview I got to do.
No worries. So with that, we're gonna go into the last question then, and this one is gonna be it's gonna speak on this. So I think actually it'll dovetail fairly nicely. But one thing that me and George have both noticed this past year through numerous articles on sites like TechCrunch is that it's been, fairly difficult for, Black founders to raise funds, often due to no fault of their own, right? Like they'll have some of those checkboxes marked off. They got the funding, they went to the right schools, the Harvards, their Stanfords, but they're still meeting with, 100, 150 VCs before they're able to get that check. So what we wanted to know was, did you see a similar level of difficulty when you had to go through that first, Series A raise, or, was the 5 months of profit combined with the events of last year enough to make that process less involved?
Right, and you guys were definitely like one of the few to be successful. Like you, I seen you reposted Tope as well with Calendly, which was a big $350 million raise, which is amazing. But yeah, we would love to hear your perspective on that.
I mean, Tope had traction. He's making what, 60, 70 million a year.
But he got denied initially though. He did get
he did.
denied.
Yeah. He did. Yeah, he raised like $500,000 for the seed round, and then he had to like scrap it out because everybody didn't give him no money. I think, and then he proved himself, right? So that he didn't die. And he focused on revenue and he grew it, right? I mean, I think it's gonna sound super corny, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like what Nipsey said. R.I.P. Nipsey is like, the only difference between him and everybody else is that he didn't quit, right? He felt every single emotion.
Favorite
right?
song by
And he made sure that he didn't die, you know. And so when you think about the fundraising process, for us, yeah, I mean, hell yeah, I had to pitch 200, 300 people too, like every time. If I didn't do it, we wouldn't do it, bro. Like I've had real tears, bro, like bawling coming down my face, like for real. Like it's a very emotional process, and it's fast process too. Like it's a very back-to-back process. But I also come through the sales world where like you know that if it's a numbers game, so you just got to keep taking shots. One of them will hit, and it always works out. But I learned that through banking. I learned that through the job search. I learned that through all of that. It's just the process of going through the job search is the same process as fundraising. If you want to be employed, you need to be sending 5, 10, 50, 20 emails a day. Your full-time job is finding a job. And I promise you, if you talk to 5 to 20 people a day, you will hit a job by the end of the month. No problem. Right? And there's a funnel, and we could go to that in general, but just like for us, yeah, I definitely did. And I talked to other CEOs to check my numbers, and our numbers were double some other founders that raised way more money than us that from the past. And even with profitability, what I've learned in the Series A, revenue isn't everything, and neither is profitability, right? Once you, like, yes, it's a checkbox, but after you got the checkbox, then they care about, like, if we give you this capital, what's that going to get you next? And so what's your 2030 vision is what becomes the story in Series A, which is shocking because you're like, dang, I got all these numbers, but like people are still not rocking with me. And the thing is Black people aren't the only ones that experience it. I do agree that there's privilege, but I got white founders that reach out to me all the time looking for Series A's, A guidance now, that are going through the same process, and I'm giving them intros. So I'm not saying that there isn't privilege. I'm not saying that there's access to nothing. I'm just saying that like the fundraising process is hard. Raising a VC fund is hard. Even the people that are raising VC funds have to go through the same process of raising capital. They got to pitch a ton of people. I just think, I think there's a lot more, you're going to get a lot more success if you understand how the game works and just play the game. And if people aren't rocking with you, they're not your people, and don't overthink it. Also, remember that no's turn to yeses. I got somebody that I pitched early on for a $25,000 check that came in at $300,000 later.
Jeez.
I have another example. I pitched somebody for a $1.5 million check. They came in at $7.5 million later. So like, don't burn the bridges. Like if it doesn't happen now, just holler at them when the price doubles.
So. That's heavy. Well, with that, that's all of our questions. We know you got to get out of here, but we definitely appreciate it. Definitely appreciate it. This has been phenomenal. You gave us a lot of game. You gave the audience today,
the people
a lot of game. So we definitely appreciate you sharing the time with us today, Ruben. And we hope that you and Career Karma continue to have meaningful success as you go into the future. And we definitely interested to continue following along you and your company's trajectory for sure.
Absolutely. And again, guys, if you guys are interested, make sure you apply, sign up for Career Karma if you
Thanks.
want to enter into those different trajectories or paths. It'll serve you well. But Ruben, we appreciate your time, brother. Thank you,
Thank you,
King,
man.
and we'll definitely be in touch. Good luck on the rest of the
Likewise, brothers.
process.
All right, man. Peace. Have a good one. Thank you,
All
guys.
right, sir.
Hey, have a good one. Have a good one.